All right, good morning, good morning. Welcome to RSA. It's Monday. I'm so happy to see so many of you here. My name is Morgan Adamski, and I am the director of the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at the National Security Agency. My background is I've spent about 16 years in cybersecurity in the US government, specifically at NSA, focusing on cyber defense against nation-state actors. Also working down in policy at the Pentagon, writing the 2018 DoD cyber strategy, and then transitioning back to be part of the stand-up of the Cybersecurity Directorate, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then I'll introduce my colleague, Josh.
Hi, Josh Zaritsky. I'm the Chief Operations Officer in the Collaboration Center. I've worked at NSA on and off for about 20 years now. Working both sides of the mission within NSA and then also spending some time in private industry.
All right, so for today, what we want to be able to do, and this is a disclaimer, I'm not really sure I'm supposed to read this to you, so I'm just going to skip right past that. What I would like to do is just talk a little bit at the top level about the evolution of information sharing, specifically at the National Security Agency, and what we've been able to accomplish the last 4 years. And Josh is actually going to walk through some actual use cases, because a lot of people come to us and they say, hey, we hear about the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, we know the things that are happening at the Cybersecurity Directorate and across the US government, but like, what does it look like? How does it happen? How do we get involved? And what are some of the things that we want to know? So we want to be able to provide you a couple of those overarching, here are the themes, here's what we look for, here's how we operate, walk through vignettes, and then we'll take any questions at the end. Also lessons learned and how you would apply it if you're currently in the field and want to partner with the US government, or just talk about how we're trying to do this from an operational collaboration perspective. So at the National Security Agency, just to do a quick baseline, we have two specific missions. We have foreign intelligence and we have cybersecurity. They are intertwined, they work together, and they are very valuable in the way that we do things. A couple years ago, former NSA Director General Nakasone made the decision that he wanted to elevate and really bring forth and rebuild the cybersecurity mission at NSA. It wasn't because it wasn't happening across the agency, but what we recognized is that we were producing this exquisite intelligence, this information about nation-state cyber actors. We had unique insight about plans and intentions. And what we really need to ensure was happening was that information was getting into the hands of the defenders and someone that could do something about it. If you could imagine bringing those two pieces together in a very large organization, you think, oh yeah, that makes sense, why not, right? But we actually had to have a lot of conversations across NSA to say, okay, how are we gonna do this? What are all the keys to success? And so at that point, the birth of the Cybersecurity Directorate in October 2019 happened. And we brought together all of the analysts who understood the threat, all of the people who were responsible for protecting our weapons platforms, some of the key things that the Department of Defense really needs to protect and cares about. And then we also said, okay, wait a second. If we have exquisite intelligence that tells us what our adversaries are trying to target, what they're going after, as well as technical information, actionable, unique, and timely information that is going to help network defenders protect, we can't just give it to the US government, our weapons platforms owners. We really have to give it to the defense industrial base, the cybersecurity community that is responsible for protecting it. That's at the base level. And so the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center was created. It was a vision. It was a vision of how are we going to share at scale with people who can really operationalize our intelligence in a way we've never done it before. And so that's when we started our mission and kind of evolutionary of where we needed to go. So looking back 4 years, what you really see is that we had a significant amount of intelligence, information, insights, technical expertise at NSA. And what we would traditionally have done was provided that information to our US government colleagues or wait 3, 6, 9 months to be able to put it out in a report. And at that point, it wasn't always actionable. It really didn't matter. And so we realized that we needed to be able to quickly operationalize that information almost in an automated fashion. And so there's a couple of different components on how we thought to do that. So we figured out that the way that we really needed to share insights and information in a way that we'd never done it before was essentially bringing together the right people with the right information, with the right capability to be able to turn things within minutes and hours. So what that means for us, right, is that when we look at partnership and we talk about success with our industry partners, we focus on 3 specific things. We focus on agility, creativity, and trust. Agility is we essentially determined that we need to tailor our information in a way that people could actually use it. I don't know about you, but what would happen from a US government perspective, who's ever worked with the US government and thought, okay, that information is not valuable? It's okay, I'm not like taking your names down, you're fine. So what we realized is that we were sharing information and insights and we were giving it to people and it wasn't always useful. They needed it in a different format. They needed more context. They needed to be able to ask questions so that we could actually make it more valuable for them and they knew how to use it. And so we have to be able to have a lot of agility, and in the US government, right, you've got to set up certain programs and you have to have the latitude to be able to make decisions quickly if you want to have that agility. So that's one of the key components of our program. Second, creativity, right? We had a lot of people, both our partners in the US government, come together and say, from a creative perspective, what does this look like? We need to take commercial solutions, commercial capabilities, collaboration platforms that everybody uses every single day. We need to wrap it in government security, and then we need to say, okay, at this point in time, if we're going to start to share information, what else do we need to make this very powerful? And that's a lot of the automated capabilities, and Jay-Z is going to talk a little bit about how we got creative with how we shared a lot of the information. And Jay-Z is Josh, by the way. And then trust. All of these programs are built on trust. We don't talk specifically about our partners because that is the power of our partnership. They trust us to protect and we protect their information. But if we're able to use their information and get out to the masses and scale, that's how we kind of achieve those cybersecurity outcomes at scale. So for the last 4 years, where we are now. So we now have over 800 collaboration channels set up where we are sharing with 1,000 partners to the tune of 35,000 analytical exchanges over the past year. 4 years ago, those numbers were 0, 0, 0. So we're going to walk through what those look like on any given day. Turn this over. I'm going to turn it over to Jay-Z now to talk a little bit about some vignettes or examples of the things that we've been able to do.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. So as she mentioned, the examples that we're going to walk through here are just a couple of the highlights that we're able to talk about in this forum. But these types of exchanges are really happening all the time, every year, throughout the year. So with this first example, related to being able to defend critical infrastructure. And specifically what happened was about a year ago, we became aware that a particular foreign malicious cyber actor was aware of non-public vulnerabilities, ODA vulnerabilities in a particular programmable logic controller, a industrial control system device. These devices were concerning to us to have these kinds of vulnerabilities because when you start talking about things that are used in critical infrastructure or manufacturing, those sorts of areas, it's very hard to imagine a legitimate intelligence purpose for those types of capabilities. So if somebody is developing capabilities against a device like that, really the only conclusion that leads us to is that it's likely intended to be used for destructive purposes. So that's certainly a high priority for us. And we worked through our internal government process to be able to disclose the vulnerabilities that we discovered to the particular vendor. Through working with them, they were able to bring their experts to the table. We were able to have conversations at both the unclassified and classified levels to make sure that at the senior leadership levels of the organization that they understood the significance and were able to prioritize resources appropriately against that particular threat. So we worked over a period of 4 months. They were able to provide hardware to our engineers for the particular devices that were being targeted so that we could collectively understand those capabilities a little bit better. And while the company was developing the patches for those particular vulnerabilities and really understanding the scope of impact across their product portfolio, they also understood that in many of these environments, it's not necessarily easy to take a device offline and patch it. These are often, again, being used in various manufacturing or critical infrastructure settings where you need 100% or near 100% uptime for all of those devices. So the other thing that they wanted to do was ensure that there are additional means to detect or mitigate those threats if they get deployed against anywhere around the world really where these devices might be employed. So through some of our other industry relationships, we were able to bring additional partners that we had in the OT security, the operational technology security space, into discussions with that vendor, and they were able to share example network traffic sessions and things like that with those other partners of ours so that they could begin to develop network signatures, mitigations to deploy within their products. So as we proceeded through this 4-month effort, by the time the vendor was ready to actually publicly disclose those vulnerabilities and make the patches available at the exact same moment, there were a variety of different tools available that already had signatures in their platforms ready to go. Through that relationship, not only were we able to disclose the vulnerabilities and ensure that they could get patched, but then make sure that this capability, again, that was linked to development of a particular foreign malicious cyber actor, we were able to ensure that those tools couldn't just be freely leveraged against their potential targets.
So the main point that I would just emphasize from that specific scenario is that collaboration is often not possible without a conversation. And so people don't necessarily recognize that. They want to talk about the fact that we just need to share more information. Sharing it is transactional. The conversation is where we really recognize what are the additional people equities that we need to pull in so that we really can ensure we have the right technical information, we understand what we're looking at, we're building the best possible mitigations, and then we're leveraging our other partners in FBI and CISA, Department of Energy, and we're able to say to them, hey, we need to get this out to as many people as possible, and we need to make sure that this information is valuable. Can you help us to do that? The other part about this specific scenario is the agility aspect of it and the creativity is that Jay-Z referenced the fact that we brought in more vendors as we went along because we kept recognizing that there were additional components and additional people that needed to be involved in the conversation to make the outcome really impactful.
Thank you. All right, so the next example here related to particular activity that we discovered from PRC malicious cyber actors targeting the US Defense Industrial Base. This effort began through routine collaboration that we already had working with some of our industry partners in the threat intelligence and endpoint and network security space, where we are tracking a variety of different activity across multiple different nation states, and in particular, a lot of activity from various PRC actors. Through that kind of routine ongoing collaboration, we saw activity that was specifically targeting a device on the edge of one of our defense industrial base organization partners. The type of device that it was targeting was the Citrix Application Delivery Controller, the Citrix ADC. So we were able to, within a couple hours of discovering that unusual interaction there, go talk to that actual DIB company and say, hey, you may want to look into this particular device a little bit further. They did their investigation and pretty quickly identified that there was some suspicious activity going on. First discovering a web shell, but then as they dug a little further, they saw some other potentially unusual activity that they weren't quite able to characterize. So in that case, we were able to work directly with Citrix, who was a partner of ours, and facilitate a little bit of that information exchange. Not all of our partners necessarily want the details of who they are or what they're doing to be known. So in this case, we were able to act as an intermediary and share information between our DIB partner and Citrix as a vendor partner of ours without having to reveal the identity of the DIB company. So Citrix analyzed some of the logs and other related activity that this DIB company had identified, and through that they found that there had actually been exploitation of at that point, unknown vulnerability. So the vendor was able, in this case, to discover that they had, again, an ODE being targeted within their particular platform. As with many of these tools, and for those of you that are in the development space, you know that it's not always super fast to be able to develop those patches and get them deployed. So again, we had to figure out, okay, how wide scale is this activity and how can we detect it and mitigate it while we wait for that patch to be available, particularly since in this case we knew that it was already being exploited in the wild. So again, being able to bring those experts from Citrix into the discussion where they understand their platform better than anybody else, they were able to really tease apart what this particular exploit was doing and what the post-exploitation activity was. And in particular, one of the interesting things that they found is that the actor was trying to put a backdoor into that particular tool that would allow them to bypass authentication. And they were doing that as an in-memory patch of the primary binary, the primary process for that particular ADC. But what the actor apparently did not realize is that on this particular device, that process was memory mapped to disk. So when they patched their backdoor into memory, it also wrote that same modification to disk where it persisted and it had a discoverable artifact. So they were able to very quickly put together some guidance that we were able to combine with some of the other insights that we had and share out more broadly across the defense industrial base community. That community then came back to us and we found that additional DIB companies were being targeted with this exact same capability. So again, working with each of these companies, understanding what was unique or common across them, and working with the vendor, as well as some of our insights, we're able to put together a fairly comprehensive set of detection and mitigation guidance that we provided out to this community. From what we were able to see, as well as what our partners could see, it was very specifically being targeted at the DIB, so that at least told us a little bit more about the scope and intent for that actor. Once that guidance was out there and then the patches were available on, I believe it was December 13th of 2022, Citrix then made their technical advisory and patches available. And at the exact same moment, we released a version of our mitigation and detection guidance as a cybersecurity advisory publicly available so that anybody in the broader technical community could leverage that information to protect their own networks in the event that that actor began to expand it out to other sectors, or if once the vulnerability was disclosed, if other actors happened to try to repurpose that vulnerability for their attacks. So again, another example that was able to play out just in a matter of months, where we were able to identify unique activity being conducted by a foreign government against US companies, as a community, identify that there was a zero-day vulnerability, get detection and mitigation guidance out quickly, and then ultimately get that activity patched and be able to alert the community to it.
Yeah, and the one piece that I'll emphasize in this entire vignette is the importance of trust, right? And so Josh talked about the fact that the DIB company had come to us as an intermediary and said, here, we have some information, we want to be able to work with the vendor, with Citrix. However, we want to kind of protect what's going on internal. And we were able to maintain that trust by facilitating that relationship, facilitating those conversations, but also, that DIB company in particular leaned extremely forward because they said, hey, we don't want this to happen to other DIB companies. We want to be able to share the technical artifacts, the insights, and the analysis that we've been able to accomplish the last couple months. And when we went out to the other DIB companies, sadly, we found it in multiple other places. However, we would not have found that and been able to detect it and remove it and remediate it without that initial conversation and the fact that the DIB company was leaning forward. And so that aspect of trust was very apparent. In the world of cybersecurity, no day is the same. We are generally dealing with multiple different events in crisis. I'm actually very impressed that Josh remembered that date, but now it's kind of burned into my brain. And so, we have those flashbacks, but these are the type of scenarios. When you hear the word public-private partnerships, when you hear the word operational collaboration, we want to start to give a visualization of what that actually means. To us, this is what it means. is how do we work together when we have an initial breadcrumb and we start to pull it apart and really bring each other's expertise, capabilities, and apertures or insight against a specific adversary and say, how do we build a comprehensive picture? Because we don't all have the same pieces. And so one other thing that we do at the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center that I'll just touch on is we provide cybersecurity services to small to medium-sized businesses in the defense industrial base. Now, what that does not mean is that we just contract out to a cybersecurity provider and companies enroll and then it's kind of a light touch, never have a conversation. So I want to walk through a little bit of that program and how we've leveraged that to be able to gain additional insights against nation-state adversaries, but also use those insights or the insights that we have from our capabilities and actually get ahead of the threat before it actually impacts that SMBs. And so when we talk about scale, if you work in the US government, if you talk about cybersecurity outcomes or impacts, everyone's like, okay, how do you do more and how do you do it faster? I'm sure that will be the talking points on the expo floor. And so what we would offer is we think about scale in 3 different ways. First, how do we work with the biggest and broadest and best companies in the US to have the impact or protect the most companies at once? That's our main way. So if I can work with the really big companies that protect thousands of companies or are able to remediate billions of endpoints worldwide, that's who I'm going to partner with. The second element that we focus on is how do we essentially pick cybersecurity services that protect against the attack vectors that we know our nation-state adversaries are using every single day. Protective DNS, phone book of the internet, very simple. Our adversaries love to redirect to a malicious website and be able to actually take command and control over your network. And so we knew that if we could offer protective DNS, which is fairly low-cost solution, it would enable us to help protect those SMBs. And so as part of our cybersecurity services program, right now we offer 3 services: protective DNS, attack surface management, which most of you know, which is essentially vulnerability scanning in different capacity, but we actually run analytics over it, decompress the prioritization list, and then tell our partners how to prioritize patching if we know nation-state actors are actively exploiting vulnerabilities or devices. So we use our insight to be able to say, hey, get ahead of this as quickly as possible. And then cyber threat intelligence, which is essentially a way for us to share our insights with companies who are actually able to leverage it and protect their own networks. And that's maybe all they want to do. They don't have the resource capacity of 1,000 cybersecurity experts to do the type of analytical collaboration on the 2 previous examples that Josh was talking about. But we're able to still share with them. We've done that pretty significantly if you know the term Volt Typhoon. When we talk about PRC cyber actors, we've been able to leverage our cyber threat intelligence program to share a lot of Volt Typhoon information to our partners so they can better protect themselves almost at once when we know about it. And so when we talk about protective DNS, to give you an insight, and Jay-Z can dive a little bit more into details, we are producing weekly block lists, which is essentially we take our insights from what we know from an NSA perspective, as well as our colleagues over in the Department of Defense and DODIN, and we update a weekly block list so that they know what malicious IPs they need to protect or domains they need to protect against. Attack surface management, again, I talked about the fact that we leverage that service to be able to essentially prioritize patching for small to medium-sized businesses because we know that there are specific nation-state actors that are going against the devices. Again, in the Volt Typhoon example, we know that they actively exploit edge devices, and so we're able to do scanning against all of our partners and tell them when we know that Volt Typhoon is trying to exploit a specific device on their network, and we say, go fix this as quickly as possible because you're likely a target. And then lastly, the cyber threat intelligence, what I talked about a little bit more. So JD, do you want to elaborate on any examples?
Sure, I can dive into a couple of those. First, on the protective DNS, it's a commercial service that DoD funds and we execute on behalf of the defense industrial base. So it's a mix of kind of the standard indicators that are already part of that commercial service, but we also are able to feed in those custom insights from NSA, as Morgan mentioned. And just from the specific indicators we have fed into the program, since we've been doing it for about 3 years now, there have been around 70 million blocks. So a lot that we're able to really contribute into that based on what we see that might extend beyond kind of the things that are generally known in the public domain. And because we are sharing that with the vendor that operates that service, they can choose to use any of that information in their commercial service to protect broader sets of their customer base, as well, but they are required to use it to protect the DIB. So we want our primary mission is to protect DoD and DIB networks, but to the extent that we can, we want that information to be able to protect other networks as well.
Yeah, and with that one in particular, one other thing I'll emphasize is when we talk about sharing it with our vendor, we also try to share it with multiple other protective DNS vendors so that everyone that's enrolled in any service can benefit from it. We also share those block lists because we're talking about industry collaboration and operational collaboration. We also share it with our government colleagues, right? So in our Five Eyes networks and our CISA networks, we try to share those block lists as widely as possible so that everyone can benefit from the fact that we're getting out our insights in a very timely manner. But we're able to do it a little bit more, let's say a little bit more heaven-handed in the fact that we have contracts where we're able to say, hey, actually put this on block.
So next, moving on to the attack surface management, Morgan mentioned that we're able to help prioritize what gets patched by letting people know when we are aware of specific foreign actors that are targeting that vulnerability. In some cases, it might be a very recently disclosed vulnerability, but we also very frequently see actors using 3, 4, 5+ year old vulnerabilities. Depending on the type of actor, some of them are going to be opportunistic. Others have very specific targets in mind, and they're going to try to really understand what does the surface of your environment look like and go pick whatever vulnerability is going to work against your environment. So one of the things that is part of that service is not just notifying them, hey, this vulnerability is being targeted, you should patch it. We also do what's called asset discovery. So we can help them understand what their internet-facing footprint even looks like in the first place, because many times these multi-year-old exploits are able to work because people don't realize that they are still operating something in some dark corner of their corporate network that is directly internet-facing, or they might think that it's behind a firewall, but that firewall is misconfigured, so it's that asset is actually exposed. In the defense industrial base in particular, we see that because there are so many mergers and acquisitions that happen, you might be inheriting technical debt from one of those other smaller organizations that you just acquired and then kind of rolled under your corporate network umbrella. So many of our DIB partners now, the first thing they do when they complete a new merger or acquisition is ask us to go back and kind of reassess what that attack surface looks like.
So the last thing we just want to touch on a high level is really what we talk about when we talk about lessons learned. So this has been a labor of love. It's been 4 years of learning how we can do things better and what's actually working. So when we talk about what does success look like? If you have a good day, what have you learned? The one main thing that we always have with our private sector partners initially is you need to start with the outcome. What are we both trying to achieve, and do we have the same priorities? Because if you're trying to collaborate on a specific nation-state actor, if you're trying to work a specific problem, and me as the NSA and the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center and the team in the Cybersecurity Directorate does not have that as a priority, we're probably not going to get very far in that conversation, then it just looks like I'm not actually helping. So we like to better understand what each other's priorities are so that we can be successful. The part that we talked about in terms of collaboration in a conversation, you have to understand the balance between the power of collaboration and automation. At times, there are people and ways that we've followed a path and we've gone towards, how do we automate everything? How do we automate indicator sharing? How do we automate sharing IP addresses? And what we've learned is while that can be good in certain contexts, that actually is not part of the entire solution. You've got to be able to have the analysts talking to the analysts about a specific IP address or about a specific technical indicator and artifact, because that's where we're learning additional insights, where we're pulling the thread and recognizing there are probably things that we haven't thought of, and how do we get after that and solve that problem? And so you can't just have automation, you've got to have automation and a conversation. It takes one spark to start a fire. And what we've learned is that our industry partners, when they've come to us and said, hey, I have something, I have no idea what I'm looking at, it looks bad, help me to better understand it. And when we put resources behind it, that's where we've been able to discover these massive O-Day exploitation campaigns. We've been able to discover that there's O-Days or vulnerabilities that we weren't previously tracking. We've been able to discover, quite honestly, the conversation that we'll have later, we've referenced the Volt Typhoon intrusion and what's happening with the PRC cyber program, is how we've been able to build a better understanding of their activity across US critical infrastructure. That is because we pulled the thread with industry partners to better understand what was happening on any given day. And the last part I mentioned just before turning it over to Jay-Z is, I always say, you're never alone. A lot of times people are like, I have an intrusion, I have an incident, I have a problem. And I can keep it internal about what I'm learning about. But what we've really seen in the last couple years is industry partners, defense industrial base, people that are having intrusions or things happen on their networks, they are coming forward and saying, I want to share what's happening to me because I know it's probably happening to someone else, and I want to protect them. And so I think that's one key thing that we've learned over the last couple years.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I'll add, and really trying to put this in the context of what will all of you hopefully take away and be able to apply in your own work, is these relationships are important. Morgan talked about scale, and really to us, this is the only way that you can really scale as needed against the magnitude of threats and against all the target space that exists. As part of that, so that requires us having a lot of relationships. Morgan mentioned there are 1,000 organizations that we are sharing with routinely. Clearly, not all of those relationships look the same. Different partners are working with us for different reasons. In some cases, they are part of the defense industrial base, and so we are sharing information to try to help protect their environment. In other cases, they are providing cybersecurity services and threat intelligence, and we are collectively sharing knowledge. But when you are working with some organization, whatever government you would normally work with, if you're part of the defense industrial base, it could be us in the CCC. If you're part of some other sector or in another country working with your local CERT team or whatever your kind of federal or local cybersecurity resources are that you have to work with, be thinking about what are you working with that organization for? What are you hoping to get out of it? Is it the information? Is it what you can contribute back? Is it, I don't have the resources, I just need somebody who can help give me some baseline level of protection? And that's really what we're trying to do with some of these cybersecurity services, leveling that playing field as much as possible.
So I think from here, what we're going to do, I'll handle this at the end, but I wanted to just open it up for questions to ask us. We're happy to share additional details on what we do every single day and some of the collaboration stories or what it looks like or anything about the Cybersecurity Directorate or Cybersecurity Mission. I know it's Monday morning, so first person asks a question. There you go. Yes, please.
I don't think I can reach this mic.
Oh.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Daphne Zweifel. I work now for Google, public sector. And I'm just sitting here and I'm so happy. I'm blown away. When I started in the industry 34 years ago, supporting the federal IT market, cyber was an afterthought. In fact, cyber was considered annoying, an unfunded mandate, and quite frankly, a blocker. As a few years went by, suddenly it was like, oh, let's bolt it in. Yeah, that was talk, and it was still an annoyance to so many people in their minds. So my question is this: what do you think, in your experience or opinion, has been the best transformative catalyst to date, and what really needs still yet to happen? Because clearly, NSA is at the forefront of all of this, and it's exciting. So what has really helped you to date, and what needs still to happen in your mind?
I'm a big supporter in the fact that, in the cybersecurity mission, we all turn to technology to solve our solutions. I think in this space, it's really been about the people. I think that we have had people internal to the National Security Agency and the people leading the Cybersecurity Directorate really lean forward and say, I want to change. We got to stop thinking about producing intelligence or producing information, and we got to start thinking about how we're going to use it. If you can't tell the full story of knowing something and then what you did about it, then we've got a problem. And that's not just in the US government, that's across our industry partners. I'm always blown away every single day in the amount of industry partners, companies, small companies, big companies, that have stepped up and said, we want to be part of the solution What's the type of information do you need? What's the type of insight? Here's where our priorities are. Here's our capacity. And here's how we want to help. And it's people that have changed that. I think going forward, we need to institutionalize what those people brought to bear and their vision, and we need to make it a much larger standing program. I think you saw this in the National Cybersecurity Strategy, right? We have a lot of these operational centers that have stood up in the last couple of years, which is phenomenal. The Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, the Energy Threat Analysis Center, ETAC, Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. We now need to figure out how we connect all of those centers from a US government perspective and make each other successful. And then how do we leverage all the phenomenal relationships and the partnerships that industry has basically stood up and said, I'm willing to help, so that we can really just secure our nation's critical infrastructure. I don't know if you had anything
Yeah,
to say.
I'll add a couple things. So one of the great things about working at the National Security Agency is we've been doing cyber since before it was cool, or at least before everybody knew how cool it was. So a lot of this has been kind of institutional knowledge for decades for us. It's now, I think, becoming much more institutional knowledge more broadly, and a lot of that is because of organizations like yours and many of the others that we work with, because of conferences like this. There's a much better awareness of cybersecurity and the fact that it's not just, like, oh, I got this virus on my computer, or, that there's really kind of like massive geopolitical potential impact for this, and a lot of risk on the part of organizations if they don't take cybersecurity seriously. So I think that general climate has helped a lot. And then to Morgan's point, the other big thing is just, at least within our organization, not only the people, but the fact that the people we have at NSA now have really kind of changed the way we think about secrecy, and that there is value in us sharing more and making more of what we know widely available so that we can get this feedback loop going.
Sir.
Good morning. My name is Jesse. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective today. You talked about how we can prepare the defense industrial base in terms of sharing information. I'm hearing a lot about this certification called Cybersecurity Model Certification.
CMMC.
CMMC.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a reasonable program in order to facilitate DIB to understand the space itself, the cyber community itself, and also improve the network that you're seeking from the defense industrial base?
So I can't speak specifically on CMMC and attesting whether or not, right, it's the thing that's going to solve everyone's problems. What I can say is that the vision behind it, right, the fact that we need to make sure we hold companies at the CEO level accountable to take cybersecurity seriously and the controls that they need to have in place to protect information is very important. Mm-hmm. To the question that happened earlier, the fact of the matter is we now have CEOs that care about cybersecurity. And whether that's because they have to have it in all of their contracts or because it's impacted them personally, I think that's a good conversation to drive regardless. Okay. I know that a lot of the cybersecurity services that we're putting in place, along with our other DoD colleagues at DC3, they are going to align to CMMC and NIST 171 requirements, and so we're trying to make it easier. But it is difficult when you have small to medium-sized businesses that have to take 100 plus controls into place. So I think there's a lot of good conversations happening about how do we practically implement it. But the vision in terms of how do we all get on the same playing field on how we think about cybersecurity is the right one to have.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, Dr. Onsetter. It's been really inspiring to hear how the Collaboration Center and the services that you provide and the intel, and looking towards the horizon and the next steps, right? Is there some consideration, we've focused a lot on technical vulnerabilities, exploitation, mitigation. Is there some aspect in the horizon to look at the human behind the attack, to leverage the intel that we do collect in order to really understand their decision-making process, in order to sort of actively engage on from a defensive standpoint and even anticipate the actions?
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal question. You're absolutely right. There's always a human behind the computer, right? And so, you know, we have some conversations and work going on internal to NSA to focus on that aspect of it, especially when you think about campaigns. How do we counter the adversary? How do we get into their mind? How do we distract and disrupt their operations at scale? I think there's also a lot of conversations across the US government, those individuals that are at our other government agencies that have background in that. How do we influence that? I do believe that conversation is happening quite frequently because it can't just always be a technical solution. And so I do think that's something we're continuing to look at. I think one of the really unique things that's happened over the last couple years is that you've seen all these cybersecurity advisories with multi-seals on them of the US government, of everyone that's playing in the conversation. But then what you're also seeing is essentially sequenced activities, disruption type activities across the US government, whether it be sanctions, rewards for justice, however you want to think about it. And they're all pieced together against the highest priority threats. To me, that's the US government having a conversation of what's all the different ways that we can influence and deter our adversaries from doing what they're currently doing against our US critical infrastructure, and not all of that is a technical solution. Any additional questions on a Monday morning? All right, well, thank you so much. This is our contact information. So don't clap yet. This is our contact information. If you're specifically interested in the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, it just went off the stage, it's okay. We can give it to you afterwards. We have a couple of different, we also have the AI Security Center, that's brand new for us, the Artificial Intelligence Security Center, where we're focusing on securing AI systems. So if you're interested and you want to partner with us, we're happy to have a conversation with you and share our information. It's also available on nsa.gov. Thank you again and have a great day.